State can call its next witness.
Thank you.
Vanessa Mielke.
All right, you're going to come right up here in front of my clerk and be sworn in.
Do you swear that the testimony you will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
All right, have a seat up here to my left.
Would you please introduce yourself to the jury?
My name is Vanessa Mielke. I'm a Forensic Scientist 3 for the City of Mesa Forensic Services.
How long have you worked there?
I have been there for over 12 years now.
And can you tell us your training and experience to work both as a forensic scientist and then, I guess, let's start there.
Okay. I have a bachelor's degree in biological sciences from Arizona State University. While in college, I was a forensic services intern for about 8 months for the City of Mesa Forensic Services. After college, I was a laboratory technician for United Blood Services for 1 year. Prior to my current position, I was a crime scene technician for the Chandler Police Department for almost 2 years. After I was a crime scene technician and I was hired at the City of Mesa, I completed the required serology and DNA training that took about 2 years.
All right, so what is your current role? What do you specifically do?
I examine items for the presence of biological fluids, conduct DNA analysis, prepare samples for DNA analysis, take notes, write reports, and review reports.
So you talked about training specifically at the City of Mesa with regards to DNA testing and analysis. How long of a process is that?
It took me about 2 years to complete all of the required training, and then every single year I'm required to do a minimum of 8 hours of continuing education.
And are there any type of quality assurance processes to ensure that your analysis is correct and your conclusions are accurate?
Yes, during training, I was required to complete competency tests along the way for each new thing that I learned. And then every single year, I have to do 2 proficiency tests to show that I'm proficient in serology and DNA analysis.
Now, at the Mesa Police Department, do you separate sort of this process and have one person take cuttings of swabs or evidence to prepare them for testing, and then another person who will take those to develop those unknown profiles for analysis?
Yes, we have serology and DNA. So there are some analysts that just do serology, and there's some that are trained in both serology and DNA analysis. For a particular case, it could be the same individual doing serology and DNA, or it could be different analysts.
Okay. So let's start with talking about DNA. What is it?
DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. It's considered the blueprint of life. You get half of your DNA from your mother and the other half from your father. Every individual has a different DNA profile with the exception of identical twins.
When the police are collecting biological evidence from a scene for DNA testing, are there different types of biological evidence that can be used for DNA testing?
Yes, the a DNA profile can be generated from hair, semen, saliva, sweat, skin cells, blood.
So you talked about skin cells, and if we are talking about swabbing different areas that people touch, if a person touches an item, do they always leave behind DNA?
No, not always. It depends on the type of surface. If an individual is wearing gloves, they're not going to leave behind their DNA.
Okay. Does the environment also impact potentially your ability to obtain DNA from a swabbed surface that someone touched?
Yes, there are different environmental conditions such as heat, moisture, sunlight that can all damage the DNA. And also if there's any type of cleaning products that have been applied, such as bleach.
So just because a person touches an item doesn't mean you're going to be able to find the DNA there.
That's correct.
And then we've been talking about sort of a DNA profile. Can you tell us what that is?
Yes, a DNA profile is it's kind of like a graph. There's different locations that I'm looking at that I am comparing from, let's say, a question sample to a known sample. So a known sample is something where I know where the sample was collected from. A typical known sample is buccal swabs, which cells are the cells from the inside of your cheek. So I have an expected DNA profile. And an unknown profile would be something from a crime scene where I don't know what the DNA profile is, but I'm going to look at all 23 different locations and I'm going to compare that to my known samples.
So when you're creating a DNA profile, do law enforcement agencies generally look at the same locations on the DNA, long strand of DNA?
Yes, different laboratories use different what's called kits, but it's all very similar locations.
You're not looking at every spot on the DNA chromosome, right?
No, just 23 different locations.
When you are looking at a DNA profile from a known source let's start with a known source, are you able to generally create a single source DNA profile?
From a known sample?
Yeah.
Yes, typically I am able to generate a full DNA profile from a known sample.
Okay. And like someone's blood would be a known sample?
Yes.
Now, if you have a cutting or a swab from a crime scene, are there different things that might affect your ability to develop a full DNA profile?
Yes, sometimes there's not enough DNA present for me to have a conclusive DNA profile, or sometimes there's too much DNA there where it's too complex, where I can't pull anything out or make any comparisons or conclusions.
Is one of the things we're talking about when we say there's too much DNA referred to often as a mixture?
A mixture is anything that's more than one individual contributing to that DNA sample.
And if you have a mixture, are you always able to tell us all the people who are part of that?
No, sometimes there's just too much information there where I can't separate out the different numbers and determine how many people are contributing to the sample.
When you develop a DNA profile from a swab from a crime scene, and there's a mixture of people who have contributed to that, do you ever have anything called a major contributor? What is that?
Yes, a major contributor is just the individual that's contributing the majority of the DNA to the sample.
And if you have a mixture, you told us you're not always able to tell all the people. Are you always able to tell us how many people contributed?
No, I don't always know how many people contributed, but we usually give a minimum number that the analyst would think is contributing to that mixture.
Okay. So if we see there's a major contributor, is there such a thing as a minor contributor?
Yes, the opposite of the major would be the minor. So if there's a major component, there's also a minor component. And with every sample, the minor component may not be conclusive.
Okay. When you are creating these DNA profiles of these unknown sources, are you able to tell sometimes if there's a male or female contributor?
Yes, there's a sex-determining marker called amylogenin. So a female would have an X and an X, and a male would have an X and a Y. If I'm looking at that sex-determining marker, if I see an X and a Y, then that is an indication that the profile is from a male. If there's a really big X and a really small Y, that would be an indication that there's a female present and there is also a male present. Because if there's just one male or two males, I would expect the X and the Y to be about the same height.
So when you are provided with a known sample of someone and some questioned sample that was taken from a crime scene, what are you asked to do with that? What does the analysis involve?
The DNA process is a 4-step process. The first step is called extraction, where the cells are broken open and the DNA is released from the cell. The second step is quantitation, where I'm determining how much DNA I have in a sample, if any at all. The third step is amplification. It's kind of similar to a DNA Xeroxing machine, where I'm making millions of copies of the DNA. And the last step is called detection, where I'm generating a DNA profile. the DNA profile from the unknown profiles can be compared to the DNA profile from the known individuals to determine if there's a match or no match.
Okay. So in January of 2020, was the Mesa Police Department lab doing DNA testing for the Gilbert Police Department?
Yes, and we still do.
And so was the process for the Gilbert Police Department to send over any known and any questioned DNA samples to you to see if you could develop DNA profiles and reach any conclusions?
Yes.
In this case, were you provided with several cuttings from Lisa Perry from swabs from a vehicle?
Yes, I was.
And were you provided with a DNA profile for an Alexander Cox that was developed by Emilyn Sapinoso?
After I completed the analysis of my samples, I compared the results from my samples to any known individuals that were also submitted for the same case.
And was that for the Alexander Cox?
Correct.
Were you then asked to develop DNA profiles from those cuttings that Lisa Perry had given to you?
Yes.
And then compare those to Alexander Cox?
Correct.
Were you provided a cutting of a swab from the steering wheel of the Jeep?
Yes.
Were you able to create a DNA profile from that?
May I refer to my report?
If that would help refresh your recollection.
Go ahead.
Yeah, do you have that with you?
I do, I can.
Or do you need a copy?
Is it okay if it has writing on
Yeah,
it?
go ahead.
Yes, I was able to generate a DNA profile for this sample.
From the steering wheel?
Yes.
Were you able to determine how many contributors were in? Well, let me ask you, was that a mixture?
It was a mixture. I have a major conclusive profile and the minor portion is inconclusive.
Okay. And for the minor, were you able to determine how many, I guess, contributors were in that mixture?
I have a minimum of 3 contributors.
Okay. Were you able to tell anything about the sex of the major contributor?
The major contributor is of male origin.
And were you able to tell anything about the sex of the minor contributors?
Since it's inconclusive, I didn't make any comparisons, or I didn't make any conclusions for the minor component.
Did you compare that major contributor DNA profile from the swab of the steering wheel to the known DNA profile of Alex Cox?
Yes, the major profile obtained from this item matches the DNA profile from Alexander Cox.
Do you have any statistics as to the frequency of that occurrence?
Yes.
Could you tell us those?
Can I read from my report?
Go ahead.
The frequency of occurrence of an unrelated individual in a random population having the same genetic profile as the major DNA profile obtained from this item is approximately 1 in 975 sextillion African Americans, 1 in 111 quintillion Caucasians, and 1 in 344 quintillion Southwestern Hispanics.
What is a quintillion?
A quintillion is a 1 followed by 18 zeros.
Were you provided with additional other swab cuttings to also attempt to develop DNA profiles?
Yes.
Were you provided with a cutting from the passenger seat belt buckle?
Yes.
Were you able to develop a DNA profile from that?
No, this profile was inconclusive due to an insufficient amount of DNA.
What does that mean?
It means that I didn't have enough information to conclusively give any results that are reliable.
So it doesn't mean there's no DNA there.
Correct.
Just means you didn't get enough DNA to do any type of comparison.
Yes.
Okay. Are you provided with a cutting from Lisa Perry from the swab from the passenger interior door handle?
Yes.
Were you able to develop a DNA profile for that?
No, this was also an inconclusive DNA result.
Was there again insufficient DNA?
Yes.
Were you provided with swabs from the lug nuts from the spare tire of that Jeep vehicle?
Yes.
Were you able to develop a DNA profile from that?
No, this DNA profile was inconclusive due to an insufficient amount of DNA.
So again, there's DNA there, correct?
Correct.
But just not enough of it for you to do any comparisons.
Yes.
Were you provided with a cutting of the swab from the gear shift of that Jeep?
Yes.
And were you able to develop a DNA profile from that?
Yes, this is a DNA mixture that indicates that there's at least 3 individuals of male and female origin.
Did you have a major contributor to that DNA profile?
I did not.
Were you able to make any determinations as to sex of any of those contributors?
Yes, I made a determination that Alexander Cox cannot be eliminated as a contributor to the DNA mixture.
What does that mean?
That means that when looking at the DNA profile that I generated from the gear shifter, the different numbers that I have on my DNA profile for the gear shifter, the numbers that Alexander Cox has on his DNA profile, he cannot be eliminated from my conclusive locations. So for example, if he has, let's say, a 7 and an 8 at one location, the DNA profile that I generated from the gear shifter also has those same numbers. So there's not a difference in the profile from the gear shifter and the profile from Alexander Cox.
Now, so for the gear shift, you can't eliminate him because there's no inconsistencies in those profiles. There's just not enough information for you to make that conclusion?
Yes, there's no inconsistencies between the two.
Thank you. Were you provided with cuttings from the swab from Lisa Perry from the driver's side seatbelt buckle?
Yes.
Were you able to develop a DNA profile from that?
Yes, the major DNA profile from this item matches the DNA profile from Alexander Cox.
So is that a mixture then?
It is a mixture. The minor is inconclusive and the major is conclusive.
So the major was the DNA profile that you compared then to Alex Cox?
The major profile that I obtained matches Alexander Cox, correct?
And did you have statistics for the frequency of occurrence for this match from the driver's side seat belt buckle when you compared that DNA profile to Alexander Cox?
Yes. The frequency of occurrence of an unrelated individual in a random population having the same genetic profile as the major DNA profile obtained from this item is approximately 1 in 123 nonillion African Americans, 1 in 715 septillion Caucasians, and 1 in 2.78 octillion Southwestern Hispanics.
Septillion. I think that's a different number. What is that?
Septillion is a 1 followed by 24 zeros.
So a higher frequency even than the other match.
Yes.
So in this case, 2 of the swabs that you tested, both the steering wheel itself and the driver's side seat belt buckle, had major contributors where the DNA profile from those 2 items matched the DNA profile of Alexander Cox.
Yes.
Did that conclude your involvement in comparing these swabs to the known sample of Alexander Cox?
It did.
Thank you. The state has no other questions.
Cross?
No questions, Your Honor.
Any questions for this witness from any member of the jury? I don't see any. All right, thank you. You can step down.
Thank you.